Alabama urban legends are mostly rooted in the state's Civil War history. But what many may not know is that these are not the only unsettling stories to come from the heart of Dixie. From abandoned churches to mysterious hotels, Alabama's ghost stories have it all. And today we will look at the 10 of the many urban legends the Cotton State has to offer. Birmingham's Sloss furnace was in operation from 1882 to 1971, transforming coal and ore into hard steel to be used in everything from skyscrapers to automobiles. The furnace was one of the biggest producers in its time, making Birmingham grow into a metropolis seemingly overnight. All progress comes at a cost, and this one was blood. During the early 1900s, the foreman working the graveyard shift, James Slag Wormwood, and his skeleton crew of 150, mostly immigrants, worked through the night to keep the furnace fed. During the summer, temperatures were known to reach more than 100 degrees throughout the plant. That, combined with the lack of sleep and low visibility, made the working conditions in the furnace a living hell on its own. To make matters worse, Slag forced his crew to take many dangerous risks to speed up production in an effort to impress his supervisors. During his time as foreman, 47 workers lost their lives, 10 times more than any other shift in the furnace's history. There were also many others who were injured so bad they could no longer work. Sometime in October of 1906, Slag lost his footing at the top of the highest blast furnace, known as Big Alice. He fell into a pool of melted iron ore, melting instantly. Reports of the accident say that Lag had become dizzy from the methane gas and lost his balance. The strange thing is, Slag had never set foot on the top of the furnace during his years of employment. Rumors started that workers finally had enough of Slag's slave driving and pushed him into the furnace as revenge. No workers were ever brought to trial, and it wasn't long after that Sloss Industries discontinued its graveyard shift, claiming that many reports of accidents and other strange incidences were decreasing production. Since the death of Slag, many workers complained of feeling an unnatural presence. In 1926, a night watchman was injured and claimed that he was pushed from behind, and he heard an angry, deep voice saying, "Get back to work." The watchman searched the grounds but couldn't find any signs of another living person. In 1947, 3 supervisors went missing and were found unconscious, locked in a small boiler room. None of them could explain what had happened. All 3 supervisors did say they were approached by a man whose skin looked badly burned, and he angrily shouted at them to push some steel. Perhaps the most terrifying tale happened in 1971, the night before the plant closed. The night watchman at the time, Samuel Blumenthal, was taking a last look around and came face to face with what he said was the most frightening thing he had ever seen. He described it as an evil-looking, half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. When he refused, the monster began to beat him. When the doctor examined Samuel, he found him to be covered with severe burns. He died soon after from those injuries. Through the years since the closing, there have been more than 100 reports recorded in the Birmingham police records of suspected paranormal activity. Some of the minor incidences, like steam whistles blowing by themselves, while there are others that are more major, strange happenings, such as unexplainable physical assaults. Most of the reports happen in the months of September and October, during the times of the old graveyard shift. Some people have dismissed these reports as Halloween pranks, but others believe it to be the spirit of the old, sadistic foreman Slag. Inside the limits of Maple Hill Cemetery is a small playground, officially named Drowse Park, but locals call it the Dead Children's Playground. Maple Hill Cemetery was established in 1822 and is the largest and oldest cemetery in Alabama. In 1869, the Maple Hill Park was built surrounding the cemetery, and for many years has earned its nickname as the most haunted park in the United States, as well as one of the most haunted places on earth. There are a couple of legends attached to the playground. According to one legend, there were many children who died in the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic and were buried at Maple Hill Cemetery. The spirits of those children come out after dark to run and play at the playground. The darker legend attached to the Dead Children's Playground is that of the children who were abducted from the area in the 1960s, and later their bodies found, brutally murdered, in the same vicinity as the current playground. Legends say that although the murders have never been solved, it is believed that the killer lived in an abandoned mine shaft adjacent to the hill area. Many have claimed that in the dark of night, the children can be seen playing. Their cries, whispers, and giggling sounds have also been reported. Others have reported seeing ghost lights floating and have witnessed the swings moving by themselves, even on calm nights. Other reports include the sounds of children's feet running around, and sometimes a woman's voice can be heard coming from deep in the woods. Sweetwater Mansion, also known as Governor Robert Patton House, located in Florence, was built by General John Brand, who owned more than 4,000 acres in the area. The 8-room house was completed by Brand's son-in-law, Robert M. Patton, in 1835. During the Civil War, the mansion's basement was used as a hospital, and then it served as the county jail. The mansion is listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. There have been many reports through the years of paranormal activity, including numerous apparitions seen in and around the house. One story told by a caretaker, as well as many others, claimed to have seen the body of a Confederate soldier with a gunshot wound to his head, lying in a coffin in one of the downstairs rooms. The caretaker later found out that the son of the first owner, Robert Patton, lost his son to the Battle of Shiloh, and the ghostly coffin has always been seen in the spot where it was laid for the funeral. The last caretaker of the mansion was so terrified of the paranormal activity, she nailed some of the doors closed to try and stop the strange happenings. There have been many paranormal and psychic groups to investigate Sweetwater Mansion through the years. One really interesting piece of evidence is of a Civil War man dressed in uniform that has appeared in front of investigators as well as in photos. Although his identity is not confirmed, it is believed to be the spirit of Patton's son, whose funeral was conducted in the house. On an episode of Paranormal State in 2007, the team witnessed a roof tile fling itself across the room, as well as a board slide from one side of the floor to the other by itself. The photos taken then revealed two small misty figures which seemed to be children. Nestled deep in the woods near Butler and Covington County line is an abandoned church called Consolation Church, with stories of banshees, hellhounds, ghost riders, and even a haunted outhouse attached to it. One of the many legends of the old wooden church is of the Gaelic banshee, whose shrieking, sobbing, and whimpering can be heard from the walls of the church, which is said to be a sign that someone inside the church will soon die. Other legends claim that hellhounds with glowing red eyes roam the cemetery in front of the church. In the cemetery is a final resting place for several Confederate soldiers that were reported to still be heard marching around the grounds. But banshees, hellhounds, and soldiers are not alone in their hauntings. Legends say that there are 2 children also haunting the property. The first is of a little boy playing with a ball that will sometimes appear to visitors of the church. Other times, only his laughter is heard, but his presence is always accompanied by a sudden wave of cold air. Legends say that if the boy rolls the ball to you and you roll it back, you will soon die. Others have reported seeing a small girl skipping down the road and then suddenly disappearing. There are also legends of a ghost truck and rider that appear to visitors who have overstayed their welcome. Legends say that if the ghost truck and rider appear, it will chase you off, but don't let it catch up to you. If it does, you will crash, killing everyone in the vehicle with you. The final legend from Consolation Church is of the outhouse, which sits a few yards behind the church. It is said that if someone enters it, the outhouse door will close and lock on its own, holding the occupant prisoner until someone on the outside opens the door. Construction of Fort Morgan along the Gulf Coast at the mouth of Mobile Bay began in 1819 and was completed in 1833. The masonry fort was named to honor the Revolutionary War hero General Daniel Morgan and is now considered one of the most haunted places in Alabama, where the ghosts of long-dead soldiers linger, along with other wandering spirits. Fort Morgan was constructed in a unique star shape that made it easier to defend and was regarded as the finest examples of military architecture in the New World. Fort Morgan and Fort Gaines sat on opposing sides of the banks and acted together to close off the bay and defend the waters. During the Civil War, Fort Morgan saw heavy fire. It was used defensively by the Confederate Army and was also the starting point for blockade-running ships. The Union Army took the fort during the Battle of Mobile Bay, and when Fort Gaines fell, they set fire to the wooden parts of the fort, killing many men. With all the bloodshed that has occurred here throughout the years, it is not surprising that many ghosts linger. Around 1916 or 1917, a prisoner is said to have hung himself in the barracks, and according to legends, you could still hear the cries late at night. During the Civil War, a bomb went off in a room with a large fireplace, and several men met a horrible, fiery death. It is said their screams can still be heard. The final legend to come from Fort Morgan says that in the 19th century, a young woman was dragged into the fort by unknown men, where she was beaten, raped, and murdered. Legends say she still wanders the fort looking for justice. Throughout the years, many people have reported seeing shadowy figures wandering inside the walls of the fort, strange mist, and odd, unexplainable noises. Many have also said that when someone feels a sudden sense of dread, they will soon see the apparitions of soldiers. Deep in the woods off Hinds Road was once a small shack where a beautiful woman named Torbid once lived. Not wanting to grow old and lose her looks, she sold her soul to the devil. Sometime in the early 19th century, Torbit began to terrorize the people of Gadsden, especially the children. Any child who dared travel alone on Hind Road looking for the witch would meet their end. This went on for about 20 years because the people were too scared to hunt down the witch. Rumors had begun that she would bathe and drink the blood of her victims to stay young and beautiful. She also used their bones to decorate the outside of her shack. Finally, in 1939, the mayor was able to gather a mob of people brave enough to confront the witch. When the mob arrived, they were shocked at what they found. Along the way to the shack, they came upon a pond, stained red with blood and bodies, along with various other body parts scattered along the banks. A little further up the road, they came across a cave with a horrific odor coming from it. One person from the mob was brave enough to enter the foul-smelling cave. He screamed and came running back out immediately. He never said what he saw in the cave. In fact, he never spoke again. No one else was ever brave enough to enter the cave to see what had caused the man such terror. As the mob made their way a little further, they came upon the shack. Standing in the doorway, Torbit stood naked. At first, the men were entranced by the black-haired beauty, but as they continued looking over her nakedness, they saw she was covered in blood, confirming she was indeed the witch they were seeking. The mob threw their torches, setting the cabin on fire along with the witch. Her cackling laugh echoed all the way to the village. Legends say the witch still chases people away from her woods. Hell's Gate Bridge is not the official name of the bridge, and it is not clear whether it even has an official name. The bridge is located in Oxford, and the bridge banks the Chocolaco Creek and was built around 1930. By 1992, it was considered in poor condition, and by 2000, it was in serious condition. The bridge is no longer used by vehicles because of the deteriorated conditions. Cement blocks and chain link fence have now been placed there to prevent people from even walking across it. According to legends, sometime in the 1950s, young lovers were driving across the bridge when they lost control of their vehicle and crashed into the water below. It is said that if you drive to the bridge at night and stop in the middle, turn off your lights, the couple will appear in your back seat. Even if you don't see them, if you look closely, you will see a wet spot. Another legend attached to Hell's Gate Bridge is that if you stop in the middle of the bridge, either driving or walking, look behind you, you will not see the entrance to Boiling Springs Road, but the fiery gates of hell instead. Perhaps the two legends are connected, and as the couple were driving across the bridge, they looked behind them and saw the gates of hell, which scared them, making them drive off the bridge to their deaths. Alabama Hospital for the Sane was designed to be a refuge for the mentally ill and opened in 1861 with Peter Bryce as the first superintendent. Bryce was an idealist and studied mental health in Europe. He believed that all patients should be treated with respect and kindness. He even abandoned the use of restraints at the hospital. The facility was later named for Bryce and went on to be a model of progressive mental health care. Unfortunately, as time went on, Bryce's legacy quickly eroded away, and by 1967 there were more than 5,200 patients at the facility that was never meant to hold that many. People often described it as a concentration camp and a model for human cruelty. For many years, Old Bryce Building was the African American portion of Bryce Hospital and was notorious for being crueler than its white counterpart. After desegregation, Old Bryce was completely shut down and the patients were integrated into the white population. After a class action suit against all mental hospitals, there were major changes in the way the mentally ill were treated in Alabama. The Old Bryce Building still sits abandoned today, serving as a reminder of the old days when patients were held like prisoners with no rights. The building is covered with graffiti and has been vandalized many times and even set on fire. Although trespassing is forbidden, many people are still curious and have entered the building. They have reported all kinds of horrors coming out of the dark around Old Bryce. Reports include lights flickering on and off with no electricity to the building, phones ringing in rooms that have no phones, phantom lights drifting from room to room, furniture moving on its own, and phantom footsteps heard throughout the halls. William Bill Sketoe was a Methodist minister in Newton, Alabama, that was captured on December of 1864. He was believed to be a deserter who hired a mercenary to fight in his place so he could return home to care for his dying wife. Some stories suggest he was secretly aiding the Union forces. Regardless, Sketoe was captured by a mob of rogue militia as he crossed the wooden bridge over the Chattahoochee and sentenced to death by hanging. When he was asked if he had any last words, Sketoe began praying, not for his life, but for God to have mercy on his executioners, which further enraged the militia. As Sketoe sat on the horse, noose around his neck, praying, they whipped the horse, causing his body to drop. Surprisingly, his feet were able to touch the ground because the militia misjudged his large frame. He was still struggling to breathe and his neck was unbroken. The militia then dug a shallow hole under his feet, and after several minutes of anguish, Sketoe finally died. After removing Sketoe's lifeless body, the militia attempted to fill in the hole with dirt and debris. To their horror, the hole was found empty the next day. Several more attempts were made to fill the hole, to no avail. This phenomenon has lasted more than 150 years with no logical or scientific explanation, and theories have led to the paranormal, an inability to cover up a gruesome episode in American history, and the unjust, torturous death of an innocent man that cannot be hid or buried. In the town of Abbeville, legends say there is a 7-foot-tall phantom woman dressed in black, wearing a large brimmed hat they call Huggin Molly. Legends say she roams the streets of Abbeville at night, appearing to children, squeezing them tight, then screaming in their ear. Most legends say she does not harm them, but there are some that say that she will hug them to death. According to legends, Molly is the ghost of a woman who lost her child and dealt with her sorrow by going around and hugging children. One story of Huggin Molly comes from Mac Gregory, who was born in 1901. At the time of his encounter, Mac was a teenager on his way home from work when he realized someone was following him. When he turned to see who it was, all he could make out was a tall, black-robed figure in the dark. He increased his speed to get away, but the figure kept up with him. Finally, he made it home, ran up the stairs inside. Today, locals still claim encounters with Huggin Molly.